I have been a member of the new South Wales Police Force for 33 years, and what I witnessed on this night was something I know I will never get rid of from my mind, and will most likely be with me until the day I die. It was about 2:25 AM on a quiet Thursday evening, and my shift was ending at 3 AM, which meant I was in a good mood as the shift has been relatively easy. That was until I assigned a job to investigate reports of screaming and distressed cries of help from a property surrounded by bushland. Now, the calls to investigate this property were frequent, and I assumed it would go how it always did. I would arrive with my flashing blue and red lights, no sirens, and drive down the driveway to witness a rather large house surrounded by dense bush and trees. No lights would be visible as the house was unoccupied due to owners going missing a few years earlier. I told my partner Matthew, not his real name, that we had been called to the house again. "Let's go there, find nothing and report back," he said, grabbing his hat and gulping down the last of his lukewarm tea. Fast forward 20 minutes to 2:45 AM and we arrived at the gates which separated the already hidden house from the road. We slowly drove down the long driveway, observing the trees on either side of us to ensure we had no contact. It was silent. There was no action of any sort on the driveway and we found nothing at the house. At least, that's what we thought would happen. On this night, there was an eerie feeling creeping up on us and we drew closer to the house. Matthew was ready to radio our commanding officer the news that nothing was amiss, until we arrived at the other side of the driveway. The house stood there, silent and proud, shrouded as always, yet unlike other jobs here, there was a light on in the living room. We ensured our tasers were ready to go in the event of an aggressive intruder and got out of the police car, leaving the headlights on and pointed at the house. The front door is locked and no windows appear to be damaged. Matthew whispered, eyeing the single light in the living room. We simultaneously approached the front door and knocked on a heavy thud. Nothing. We knocked a second time, hoping the occupants didn't hear us the first time. There was nothing. This is where it gets creepy. Upon knocking a third time, Matthew went stiff as a statue and began shaking. What can you see?" I stopped. I could feel goosebumps forming on my arms. Peering out of a window from the second floor was a person. A woman wearing a white gown staring down at us. We couldn't see her clearly as the window was foggy, but we knew it was a woman aged around 21. Matthew was petrified, and I can't blame him for being so. I called out to the woman and demanded she opens the door. She stared down for a few more moments and then turned around and walked off. We could hear footsteps coming down the rickety staircase on the other side of the door and braced ourselves to stand face to face with this woman. Then it all went silent, as it once was. Matthew put a hand on his radio and notified the commander that there was a possible intruder and we needed an extra car as support. Before the commander answered, an almighty bang ricocheted through the house. It sounded like a gunshot, so Matthew and I tailed back to the car and took cover behind it against the boot. Matthew turned his head to me after looking back at the house as more bangs followed. I was texting my wife that there were gunshots, and I loved her. Paul, you need to look now," Matthew said to me. The fear was amplified through his voice as he said this. I slowly peeked around the side of the car and almost shrieked at what I saw. The living room light was off, but now the entire second floor was illuminated by a green light. A bright green light. We studied it, slowly calming ourselves and reassuring one another that backup was coming. The banging stopped, and when we were ready, we ventured very slowly back towards the house, almost crawling. As we got to the front porch, we heard another sound. Not a footstep or a loud bang. This sound was a blood-curdling scream that had stuck with me to this day. We couldn't wait any longer for backup. We breached the front door, guns drawn, and followed the source of the screaming together. We dare not split up in a place like this, not tonight. We went upstairs ever so slowly, not blinking and hyper-vigilant of our surroundings. The green light was coming from the room we saw the woman. As I neared the door, Matthew bumped a bass and it felt like a loud crack. The second it hit the ground, we heard a male voice yelling to us. "Hey, hey, what are you doing here?" he yelled. "My name is Senior Constable Cooper of Uni Police. Show yourself," I yelled firmly. "You have no idea what you have stumbled across, Senior Constable," the man said, thumping something, prompting more screams. I said nothing and readied myself for the other side. I gave the door one hard kick and it came fumbling down. Inside was a circle of blood, 15 to 20 green candles, and a white gown that looked brand new. There was no sign of anyone in that room at that time, and we were certain the screams and the talking came from there. "What the fuck is this?" I said once again, turning face to Matthew. But Matthew was nowhere to be seen. "Matthew!" I called a dozen times, to no avail. I could hear sirens in the distance, and as I looked out of the window I could see the distinct red and blue flashing lights through the trees. Backup was here, but Matthew was not. For the next 35 minutes I searched the house from top to bottom for Matthew. With the 3 officers that have just arrived, I ventured down into the cellar under the kitchen and found something that haunts me to this day. Matthew's credentials, identifying him as a member of the New South Wales Police, as well as his gun and 3 bloody fingers, placed neatly on the ground. I screamed at the top of my lungs for the other officers to come to me and call for forensics and virtually everyone available at the time. By the time I got home was 5:30 AM and the sun was rising. Matthew was never seen again, nor did forensics find any trace of him. The fingers found were identified as his. 2 of them were. The 3rd was unknown and remains unknown to this day. It took me 45 minutes after getting home to decide to resign effective immediately. It has been 10 days since that night, to this day, November the 21st, and I still hear the screams of that woman and the distinct voice that warned me in that house. Please, if you ever hear screaming in the middle of the night, call the proper law enforcement. Do not venture by yourself to investigate. I've been a police officer in Mineral Wells, Texas for going on 5 years now. If you're wondering, Mineral Wells is about 50 miles west of Fort Worth and has a population of about 16,000 people. The people here are salt of the earth people, God-fearing, hard-working and kind. I hope you enjoy the stories and remember, don't have nightmares. Mineral Wells becomes a ghost town, no pun intended, after about 7 PM. Driving the streets at night can become downright creepy, even from the safety of my patrol car. In the 5 years that I've been here, I've seen and heard some strange things. I don't even believe myself at times. If I hadn't have had my own strange experience when I was a child, I'd probably think I was crazy. But I'm not. The things that happen here are sometimes unexplainable, but they are real. I'd like to relay one of my experiences to you. If you enjoy, perhaps I can tell you more, because I have a ton. To understand mineral wells, you have to understand its history. I learned most of this after I visited the local historical society about 6 months after I moved here. Apparently, the town was settled in 1881 by a guy named J.A. Lynch. After Lynch dug up the first drinking water well, he claimed that the strange taste in water cured his rheumatism. Mrs. Lynch claimed that the water had cured her arthritis as well. Mineral-enriched water had prime medicinal value in the 1800s, and soon the word got out about its healing properties. A second well was dug up several years later, and then a third. It was out of this third well that a woman with dementia often drank. Guess what happened? Her dementia was miraculously cured. The local children started calling this third well the Crazy Water Well, and eventually the term crazy water was coined for the miraculous water that flowed from the earth. News about this crazy water spread far and wide, and by the early 1900s, mineral wells had become the South's greatest health resort, with hundreds of mineral wells, bathhouses, spas, hotels and that kind of stuff. People travelled from all over the country in hopes of experiencing the healing power of the crazy water themselves. As you'd probably imagine, many of these visitors were old or infirm, and many never made it out of the town alive. Today, Mineral Wells is a shadow of its former self. While it has some industry, it operates mainly as a tourism and a retirement community. But don't let that fool you. In this town, Faulkner's famous quote holds deeper meaning for those of us who choose to call it our home. The past is never dead, it's not even past. After I'd been on force for about a month, I had my first experience with the strangeness of mineral wells. We had gotten a frantic 911 call about a dead body. I still remember the address, 200 Hubbard Street, the address of the Baker Hotel. I was working nights at the time. Apparently, that's where the rookies start. The call came in at about 12:30 AM. My partner and I were in the area, and it didn't take us very long to get there. When we arrived, the 911 caller was gone, but the body was there, just as described. It turned out to be a young woman. She was splayed out on the red brick steps that led up to the front entrance, her back obviously broken and her head completely smashed. Also, she was totally nude. It was the first dead body I had seen, and it was gruesome. You didn't have to be an expert to determine that she had fallen from a great height. I remember looking up to see if there was any balconies that she could have fallen from. There wasn't, but there were plenty of windows, and since this was an old hotel, they didn't have the safety features that the modern day hotel windows have. In fact, many of the windows were open. I later learned the Baker Hotel had been shut down in the 70s, but no one would ever admit as to why. We secured the scene and called in the investigative unit. The girl turned out to be a 29-year-old Pamela Allen. She had been a resident of the Mineral Wells all of her life and worked as a manager at a local cafe. On the night in question, Pamela had been out with some girlfriends at a bar that was near the hotel. One of the girls who had been out with her told the investigators that they had been hanging out on the 7th floor of the hotel drinking after the bars were closed, and they suddenly realised that Pamela was nowhere to be found. They began looking for her, and they found her clothes in a pile of one of the rooms next to an open window. That's when they realised that she had fallen and called 911. The first was that Pamela had been overheard saying she needed to go meet Virginia, but none of them knew any friend of hers by that name. The second was that there were rumours in town that she had been having an affair with the owner of the cafe that she worked at, but none of them admitted to ever seeing her with him. When I heard all this, it seriously disturbed me. By all accounts, Pamela was a well-adjusted young woman and had no reason to kill herself. Why did she do it? And why did she take all of her clothes off before jumping? After the full investigation, I didn't hear much about the case again. The investigators thought the circumstances were odd, but odd things happened in Mineral Wells and they had more pressing cases. The case was closed. It wasn't until about 5 months later, as I was poring over manuscripts at the Historical Society's archives, that I came across a passage that made the hair stand up on my neck. Here's what it said. One story involving the Baker Hotel revolves around a woman known as Virginia Brown, a resident at the hotel, who was the alleged mistress of T.B. Baker, the owner and builder of the hotel. According to legend, Virginia was upset over the affair and drunkenly plunged to her death after jumping from the 13th floor. Many visitors to the hotel before its closing in 1972 have reported seeing a bloody woman, sometimes wearing a red dress and sometimes nude, roaming halls after midnight. This freaked me out and I was about to note right on out of there, but before I did, I realised there was another reference to another document. It turned out to be the hotel's ledger from the mid-1900s. I searched for Virginia Brown's name and found it. She had been a resident at that time, and there was a notation under the room heading, Room 714. It was then I knew there was something extremely strange going on in Mineral Wells, Texas. But what exactly? Incidentally, I would later find out that the Baker Hotel is still relatively famous nationally, and I think one of those ghost story TV shows even did an episode on it. If you'd like to hear more about more of my experiences in Mineral Wells, check out part 2 coming soon. God knows I need someone to hear them. I am a communications officer. When people dial 999 and ask for police, I am one of the people they get through to. It's tough, I'm not going to lie. I wear a uniform, it's like a police uniform, but blue. I don't have a stab vest because we work in an office. We sit at huge banks of desks in line with supervisors standing at the end of every one. I have a headset with earpieces and a microphone and a computer in front of me. The light flashes, I press accept and type as I ask questions. Name, location, incident, category, assault, suspicious package, burglary, etc. I take all the details I can and categorize the incident by the level of urgency. If someone's come home and found their house has been broken into, that's not as urgent as a robbery in progress. I work 10-hour shifts and take call after call. If I need to get up and take a piss, I have to raise my hand to get excused by the supervisor. They time you as well. We get a huge variety of calls. Sometimes it's something and sometimes it's nothing, time wasters. Sometimes you get some fucking awful things. My third shift, I got a call from a woman who was just screaming. She'd woken up from a nap and found her baby dead in the cot. I'll never forget that as long as I live. Losing a child is something you never get over. I know a few of the guys have started to drink a bit too much, not alcoholics or anything, but every time they come home to a few drinks. It's the only way you can sleep. If I'm totally honest with myself, I can see myself slipping down that road as well. Last week I was working the night shift. It has a rep for being pretty bad. You get a lot of violent calls on the night shift. I'd been working for about 8 hours at a time. 2 more to go. I was surviving on coffee, shoving one call after another to the guys in dispatch. Then I got this call. The light flashes, I take a drink and click answer. Police, 999, what's your emergency? All I hear is breathing. Now, this isn't that unusual. We sometimes get people who are running, panicking, confused. Sometimes people are injured. Sometimes they're trying to make a call without being heard. Police 999, my name is Laura. Can you tell me the nature of your call? Is it an emergency? No response. The breathing sounds like a woman or maybe a child. I need to know your location and what's happening. Then I can get help to you as soon as possible. Are you able to speak to me? There's a soft sound that comes in then, like a scratching, like someone scraping their fingernail on the mesh surface of the microphone. I pause for a second, then collect myself. Are you unable to talk out loud? The scratching sound then comes again. Scratch, scratch. Okay, let me see if I can help. 1 scratch for yes and 2 scratches for no. Do you understand? Scratch. Great. Like I said, my name is Laura. I'm going to get officers to you as soon as I can. Please stay on the line. I start waving my supervisor over, who spots me straight away. I point at the screen, where he sees my typing. Caller is unable to speak out loud. Attempting other communication methods. He nods, understanding straight away, and jogs over to the bank of the IT guys. Are you injured? Scratch, scratch. Are you in fear of your life, your physical safety? Scratch. Are you able to get to a safe place? Scratch, scratch. I can see my supervisor talking to the computer guys who are trying to trace the call. From the time it's taken, it seems to be a mobile, so they have to go through the phone masts. Is it a person who is causing you to fear for your safety? Scratch, and a small intake of breath. Are they there with you now? Scratch, scratch. But you're afraid that they will hear you. Scratch. Are you restrained in any way? Scratch, scratch. Don't worry, I tell her. We'll find a way to get help to you. Are you in a house? Scratch. Is it their house? Silence. Do you know where you are? Scratch, scratch. Can you see a window to look out of? Scratch, scratch. I was starting to panic a bit now. I'm highly trained, but you only get a few calls a year which strike you like this. I was starting to worry about my ability to help. If they don't know where they are, and they can't speak to me, how can I send a car if I can't find out where she is? Then I hear something. The breathing gets quicker. Are you still there? I ask. There is no response. Can you let me know if you're okay? There's a scraping, a scrabbling sound, and then the line goes dead. The call light flicks out, just an empty dial tone. I then swear to myself, not quite as under my breath as it should be. Looking straight over to the IT lads, I see them shaking their heads. No luck, no trace on the call. I work the rest of my shift feeling sick. It's almost routine, but I just can't get that out of my head. See, as a comms officer, when something comes up like that, you can't manage to find out where that person is. You feel responsible. If that woman is hurt or killed, then surely a lot of that's down to me. On the drive home through empty city streets, I run that conversation through in my head, over and over again. I think what I could have done differently. I was worrying about that woman, where she is, what's happening. I get home, throwing my bag on the sofa. I pull a bottle of beer out the fridge and pop open the cap, fixing the cat her dinner as she rubs around my ankles. That woman could be being raped or tortured, and we had an opportunity to find her, and we didn't manage it. I had visions of a woman locked in a cellar somewhere, at the mercy of some pervert. I flopped down on the sofa, stuck the TV on and slumped. I woke up half an hour later to the phone ringing. I steered, blinking. It was dark still, just starting to get lighter. It was the home phone. Now, I almost never use the landline. I mostly have it just because it's the only way I can get Wi-Fi. This has got to be something bad. My mum maybe, who hasn't been well. I drag myself to my feet and head as quickly to the phone as I can, fumbling with it pressing to my ear. Hello? There was nothing, just breathing. My stomach drops. Hello? Without the background noise of the office, without the tapping keys and the voices of the other officers, I can hear more clearly. My stomach knots. I feel like I might vomit. The beer churning. Anna? I ask. Scratch. Are you... This isn't funny. Scratch, scratch. I swallow, mouth dry. Is it? Baby, are you safe? Scratch, scratch. I feel the panic bubble over. I can barely form my words. Baby, please tell me wherever you are. Whatever I can do, please, tell me. I'm... Scratch, scratch. Where are you? Scratch, scratch. I can hear those tiny, soft whispering breaths. Then one catches. A sound of panic. A scraping on the floor. Anna! And then she replies, Mummy! And then the phone cuts out. The caller withheld their number. She's called back every night since. Every night is the same. No answers. Just her little breaths and the scratches on the floor. However many times she calls, I will answer. Every time. Perhaps one night I will be able to find some way to help her. 7 times she's called. 1 for every year of her life. 1 call for every year she's been dead.